Today is talking about mapping out your dream therapy career, making it happen. Um, and it's a wonderful topic no matter where you are. So you could be a new grad, you might be a student on affiliation, you might have been like myself in double digits in the therapy field, and that's totally cool. It is something that's always worth revisiting, especially in this day and age. In the 2020s, we're in the mid 2020s now. Um, and life is only going to move faster with more pieces, and it's going to be a lot more dynamic. And it's really become almost a new social contract of sorts, where we're kind of revisiting how and why we even got here in these careers. And we want to make sure that it aligns with what we want downstream, so we don't find ourselves, locked in or burnt out, or even having that dreaded sense of purposelessness. That's really what today is about. There's some reality checks that we'll open up with, and then it kind of just cascades really, really quickly into the actionables that you can take. And that's really important because, to really understand how to map out your dream therapy career, you really have to understand kind of the factual basis of where the therapy job market really is. So let's hit to it. I do want to say that there's a financial disclosure here. I am being paid for this, but otherwise no other related relationships to disclose. And in terms of the learning objectives, right? The idea here today is that you have a solid foundation for where you're going to be or what you want to do in 1, 3, 5, 10, 20 years out from now. And when I give this talk, and I've given this talk for the better part of 15 years in one way or another. This talk is really about understanding kind of what you want to get out of life as a whole with your therapy career alongside. As mentioned, we're going to talk about salaries, and then we're going to talk about like how to actually map out that plan with a certain sense of precision. So you have true actionables, not just like, oh, it'd be nice if I got X, Y, or Z in 3 to 5 years. Really hard steps that you need to take to get there. So as a point of entertainment, because what's a good lunch and learn if you're not going to chuckle about it? I actually uploaded my CV, and then I kind of typed out a little story on the Gemini AI. That's Google's AI. And I said, hey, can you create a clip art graphic of my career path to date? And this is what it spat out. And we're going to come back to this, but I just thought it was really funny, like how it does things. One of my favorite bits of AI when you ask it to be generative is it tends to like draw things weird or like misspell things. So like, in the center left, you see skilled nursing with, I think, a single L, but kind of got merged together like a hieroglyphic. So it's kind of funny. We're going to come back to it. Let me kind of story tell a little bit in terms of how I even got here to today's webinar, and then how we can kind of take some of my mistakes and mistakes I've seen along the way that were made from others, as well as success points, and then you can apply it to yourself. So I guess a little bit of story time, slight humble brag. So I actually wasn't a physical therapist to start with. I was nowhere near it. I was one of 2 people in my class in PT school that didn't have something directly kind of pre-PT, classically speaking. So no strength and conditioning background, no athletic training background, no kinesiology background. I didn't have a biology degree or a biochem degree or pre-PT degree, none of that. I myself, I was a bioengineer or a biomedical engineer before, which is a lot less bio and a lot more engineering. And then there was another classmate who was a sociologist. And that actually perked the interest of the admissions board, and they let me in under probation because I had a horrible GPA because it's engineering school, and that's a whole nother story. But it's also like a quick shout out that even if you fail early, you can still come on top later. And that might be what you're feeling now. You might be maybe a new grad and you're in that dreaded 15 to 19 month burnout window, and you're like, man, I don't know if this was the right choice. Or you could be in the 12 to 15 year tenureship mark or experience level as a clinician, and you're like, wow, I have nowhere to go from here. So, whatever the case, I've been there. I started my PT career in acute care, doing a bunch of random stuff, anywhere from critical care to piloting emergency department program, to helping the neuro department do differential diagnosis on vestibular versus cerebellar and other types of strokes. It was a lot of fun. It really expanded everything, but very quickly I found myself hitting various types of administrative glass ceilings where the system at large wasn't ready for. I'm sure you guys feel this too, right? You have all this capacity to contribute to whether it's a small clinic or a large health system. You're like, there's so much I can do to help, but the system isn't there to enable or empower me to add to these value propositions. And that's where I found myself, was that I was always found under some kind of steering committee, and they didn't want a PT's idea or a rehab therapist's idea. They wanted like a physician's or a pharmacist or a charge nurse's idea. And so I saw some mentorship, which is very key. I'll mention that later, from the hospital CEO. And he's like, yeah, you have to understand the political forays of healthcare in the macro. What's the big zoom out lens of who is the decision makers in healthcare? And it's all business leaders. It's all folks with MBAs or accounting degrees or financial degrees, or even some of them with like marketing and PR degrees. So, he was like, hey, look, it's wonderful that you have your doctorate. It's venerable, fantastic. But when you bring that to an executive boardroom, it means nothing. So he told me, look, go get an MBA. And that's what I did. Eventually, I went through the circuit of working all the various major settings, from skilled care to rural home care, where like the clip that you see there, right? It's like almost like you're driving into a scene out of Training Day with Denzel Washington, and you're not sure about how that afternoon's going to go. So I was able to experience all of that. And shortly after, I went down the entrepreneurial route. I got into private practice in PT. And I also started doing remote work management. And through a better part of a decade on that, I eventually started to step back from that. And currently, I am doing a mixture of work in education and in telehealth, and also in some like small business marketing consulting. So that's kind of my mixture right now. And if that sounds like something that you're familiar with, or maybe it's like pieces of that is exciting to you, we're going to talk about how to get to those places. I also wanted to kind of just highlight some fun things along the way. And this is really kind of the first like sidetrack thought that is worth thinking about is, you hear it a lot on social media and a lot of surveys is looking for non-clinical roles or atypical opportunities. And I found myself doing some PR work actually for the APTA. I was a Media Corps spokesperson, national spokesperson for 6 years. And that got me a lot more opportunities to get under the limelight. You see me there in the clip here. I'm the, I had a little top knot back there. I'm next to the tall guy wearing the orange shirt doing the ruck swing incorrectly because his elbows are bent, right? A proper kettlebell swing has the straight arms, and you're using a glute hip hinge and a proper. But I'm there, in a Men's Health magazine, quoted and all that kind of fun stuff because of those opportunities. The other thing that I recently got into is emergency response. You would not believe the amount of respect. I know that's kind of a thing for us, right? As rehab therapists, rehab clinicians, often we don't feel like we're receiving the amount of respect that is due to us. But man, in the emergency and disaster response environment, the moment I kind of sheepishly said, oh, I'm a physical therapist, all eyes were on, so many questions. All the first responders wanted to talk to me. And then I ended up becoming a subject matter expert and instructor for my local, I'm here in San Diego, community emergency response team, which is sponsored by the local fire department special operations division, and it's overseen by FEMA. So it's like a big thing, and it's just another way that you can apply yourself in very atypical roles, and they're all there for us if you know how to chart it. So after kind of going through that story time, I'll flip it back to the AI thing, and we can see kind of like why it said what I did. In there I didn't talk about it, but I was a bartender for a little bit before I was a PT aide. I did dip into wellness. That's a whole nother story there as well, where I got picked up by the local not magazine, but local newspaper for like a fitness studio competition where we were finalists. And that's very fun. I just noticed right now that I think telehealth is, I don't know, something about that is like, it feels misspelled to me. It's like, I think it's the way they wrote the L's, like telehealth. But, and ultimately, when I mean education, I spent a good amount of my time as an adjunct professor in healthcare and business administration, doing also continuing education at Summit and privately and with other brands. And so there's a lot of ways that you can cobbled together is probably not the right way, but I would say integrate or weave different interests or passions or ideas for yourself, that you can truly get together a career that fits you, that you're happy with and you're fulfilled with, you feel it's going somewhere or has landed where your sweet spot is, while you continue to plan for other things so that you don't feel locked in or pigeonholed in the next 3 to 5 years. And that's kind of the first like numerical checkpoint. Usually when we talk about mapping out a career, the first mistake most people make is the accidental career path. So being pigeonholed is very, very easy to do in any industry. It's not just in healthcare. It's not just in rehab therapy. It happens everywhere. It's really more of a human workforce issue. And that's where it takes about 2 to 3 years for most people to really settle into an industry. And by then, you're finally comfortable. You want to kind of enjoy that level of comfortableness or competence or confidence or whatever you want to call it, right? It's like the turbulence of learning is over and you're like, okay, I'm in the zone and I want to like really enjoy this. And ironically enough, that's the time to make new shifts. There's actually a really, it's a classic article now. I believe it was first published in 2011. But they've done repeated studies on this. The Forbes article stated that over, I think, the career lifespan of like 10 to 12 years, I think it was what it was. If you change jobs, even laterally, every 1 to 2 years, by 10 years out, you'll be paid 50% more than if you stuck with the same job for 10 years. And that was in the early 20 teens. These days is a little bit different. There's some data to suggest that that's still kind of true. May not be up to 50% anymore. And that was an industry agnostic stat that they published back in 2011. I'm not advocating you guys to like, okay, I'm quitting my job today, doing a lateral transfer. I'm advocating you guys think strategically about the fact that change is good and change helps you get a leg up on your situation and change is growth. Now, the other thing to speak about in terms of the accidental career path is that you have to understand the way the job market flows in our industry specifically, where often, right now at the, call it the entry level, right, you're getting burnout at 9 to 15 months. Typically, you're getting job changes every 1 to 3 years. Most supervisors turn over every 1 to 2 years. Most mid-level managers turn over every 2 to 5 years. And most senior managers will turn over every 4 to 8 years, depending on the size, scale, organization, and most importantly, location. If you're working, say, rural Oklahoma, probably not much is going to change for about 8 to 12 years. If you're working, on the coast, a major city, metropolitan medical campus, you'll probably follow those rules. And so it's important to understand your individual organization's career life cycle. If you have a mid-level manager that's been there for 15 years and they show no sign of changing, retiring, or even seeking promotion, like that's going to be, call it an artificial glass ceiling barrier where you have a manager there just doesn't want to change. There's other commentary on that as well, where sometimes a manager is placed there because that's where they do the least amount of damage, where an organization, they can't afford to remove that person because they come with too much legacy or institutional knowledge. But at the same time, they don't necessarily want them to stay. It's just kind of like the least damaging move at certain points. And I have all sorts of commentary on that. Feel free to throw that in Q&A as well. I have a lot of experience in terms of consulting in that particular regard, in terms of organizational excellence and then developing the workforce. All right, so where are we now? Now, that's kind of the big question. Where are we now so that we can chart where we're going? And here's a couple of stats to look at, in terms of where are the therapy jobs. Currently speaking, here's the pie chart. I'm not going to read it out to you, but you should, if you're listening over the phone or what have you, I'll just say very quickly that, no, not surprisingly, right? Most of us are working at some kind of therapy office. The rest of us are probably working in some form of hospital health system, university health system, that kind of stuff. And then it kind of drips down into things like home health, or skilled care, or a travel contract, or some kind of mixture, maybe school or private practice, self-employed, that kind of stuff. And it breaks down, very sequentially, and it's a volume game. It's very similar to, if you're an outpatient, I think the statistic still holds where, depending on where you are, somewhere between 80 to 85% of employers in the the area are going to be orthopedic in private practice. But then the flip side is true, right? Where like 12 to 15% are like the largest employers, and they hold all the workforce talent pool because they have that many more clinics, and that many more FTEs available. Here are some other like kind of pay stats, and I'm going to talk about this in detail, just because if you're looking at this, if I'm looking at this, right, and I'm a PT, I'm going to say I don't know any PTs that are being paid that much, and if I'm an OT, I'm going to think kind of the same thing. And if I'm a speech language pathologist, you're probably thinking that's kind of okay, but there's also like people that that are being paid way more. And the reason this is the case, and the reason this is kind of the first huge takeaway in terms of like mapping out your career, especially on the salary side, if that's like the priority right now, especially for new grads, it's fully understandable with a student loan. Debt ratio is huge, right? So you need to be able to make money to make that dream career happen. Otherwise, it's not happening in life either, right? The dream life isn't there either. The reason this is the case, and it's so important to understand this, is that BLS, as well as many of the third-party statistical gatherers, don't count into consideration curvature. And if you know me outside in the therapy industry, you might know me from a little report called the Job Market Pulse. And I run a private open source data pool of job market and salary data in rehab therapy for the last 10 years. And that's something I talk a lot about, is that often when you see these general reports, they just kind of smash the mean together. Here's what's actually happening. In the line workforce data pool, whether published by BLS or any other third party, like say LinkedIn, Glassdoor, that kind of stuff, Indeed, what's actually happening is that in our industry, if you take a look at the upper graph, like the part A, it's a right skewed distribution. What it really means is that there's a little chunk of us that are getting paid really, really well, and the rest of us are down here. And so that drags the mean upward to make it look like the average is a lot higher than it really is. And that's true across PT, OT, and speech, industry-wide, settings non-specific, and locationally non-specific. That just happens in every single state across the nation, and also sorts of stuff like that. Is that there's a small chunk of us that are getting paid very, very well. And then that drags the average up, and it kind of makes us feel like, wait a minute, like, how come I'm not getting paid that way? The opposite is true for management. So if you take a look at the lower side, the B left skewed distribution, what most managers in our field are paid is actually a lot lower than the average. And so you can see how there's like a small chunk, that are, that are actually being paid on the other side. And so, the low side is really low, and it drags everything in the opposite direction. And so often, what you start to feel is that line folks, line therapists, when you see these numbers, you feel underpaid. And then what ends up happening is that typically entry-level managers will feel like, not that they're overpaid, but they should just feel thankful that they're being paid that much at all. And that's a whole discussion point as well in terms of the math. There's actually a math ratio of how much more you should be paid as a, say, clinic director or a DOR or what have you. And I do see a question come through, so I'll address that in a moment. Let's just kind of like finish off with some of these numerical values, and then let's definitely discuss it. Here are just some other things to share. These came out of a combination of things. So the table on the left here, just, if you're following along, or maybe you're going to, if you're listening over the phone, audio only, you want to come back to it. This is salary norms and variations slide. It's slide 14. You'll see different median averages. Actually ask AI to populate that. The one on the right actually is a big point of discussion. It actually goes right into the Q&A I just received, which is, does it actually pay better to have more experience? And conventional wisdom is, yes, it does, because you always hear it, right? Like, okay, experience is going to pay. The data does not actually follow that, which is really interesting. This is data I've produced myself, and this is a very interesting graph. If you just kind of follow it, what it actually does is it charts what the average per annum equivalent pay is for a physical therapist from 0 to over 25 years. Actually, is how much data we have, because there's plenty of therapists that are in their 30-year tenure or seasoned veteran group. And then we tracked the associative quality of that. If you remember your statistics, because that's everybody's favorite subject, right? Statistics. There's something called a Pearson's correlation coefficient, and you can do it in squares. So it's R squared. That's how relational something is. We know that correlation isn't causation. However, right, if I see thunderclouds, I'm probably going to go inside. And that's kind of how you can interpret the R squared value. If the R squared value is, say, 0.9 or 0.95, there's like a 90 to 95% chance that something is actually going in a linear direction. So like if this line was going straight up and is saying, oh, wow, of course, if you're getting paid more because you have more years of experience and you have a 90% correlation on that, I can trust that number. Unfortunately, for our industry, it's about 50%. And here's what's going on. This number, again, is skewed. And this is actually filled in our industry. Is we have bimodal distribution, meaning we have a pocket of averages here and a pocket of averages here. And so depending on which circles that you float in, you're going to feel a little bit off depending on what number you're actually looking at. Excuse me. I've been fighting a crazy allergy attack, so I apologize. I'm going to pop in a cough drop. What actually is going on is that those that stick around standardized, like usually they're like negotiation pool type employers. So that's university systems, healthcare systems, hospitals, federal employers. They have a pay scale that they are obligated to. And so there's a certain level of guaranteed pays and raises depending on your tenureship and experience in the field and so forth. There's like a whole grid structure in there. And it's at those places where experience really pays off, because if you're given 2, 3, or back in the day, it was like 5 to 6% raises every year, depending on performance. That stacks up very quickly by 8, 9, or 10 years in that same health system. We don't get that nowadays in this economy, but it mattered a lot, back in the early 2000s and the 2010s. And so those kind of organizational roles, that's where you saw people getting paid really, really well, 10, 12, 15, 20 years in industry. However, in the private sector and in most other systems now, like even publicly traded companies, this doesn't really exist anymore. And that's why you see it by the numbers, where it really doesn't show the growth that you would think it does. So it's a little bit of an illusion. Just more numbers. I'm not going to read this off, but this is just for physical therapists. So I apologize for all you OTs and CODAs, as well as anybody that might be in SLP or SLPAs. This was came from the year 10 job market pulse. So I just screen capped it there. And I'll talk about where you can find that as well. But this was just to kind of give you a mixture of what the average per annum equivalent was. Excuse me. And again, different things like this one was really, really interesting. The clinic director piece, right? Like, I don't know any clinic director that's making $160,000 a year. I just don't. But what happens is when you gather certain data, then you start to include, say, regional directors and vice presidents and that kind of stuff. That's what drags everything up, depending on what the statistical piece. I really wanted to put that there to kind of get us kind of back to a base and a reality check of what's actually happening there. So I do want to answer this Q&A that did come through. Is how does that? The question states, how does a pay scale for PTs shift for one with 25 years of experience? And that, and I'll answer that specifically, as well as to kind of what you see in the arc. So typically what you're going to see working backwards is that once you get to about 18 years in, there's kind of a weird salary cap that occurs, and that actually starts between 12 and 15 years. And that's just because there's only so much, depending, especially on your setting, right? Let's say outpatient. There's only so much that an employer can pay you to match and cover what you're billing for, where it basically becomes a break-even point. And so typically the clinicians that have that level of experience, especially if they're actually, truly, truly good and have really good networking skills within the community, that kind of stuff, really what the employer is paying you for is that brand presence. They're not paying you for your revenue generation anymore. And so there's a blunting that unfortunately occurs that starts around 12 to 15 years. Kind of working from the beginning to play like a little sandwich. What typically happens in terms of pay for scaling, and this is true for OT as well as speech, is that they're pretty much lowballed out of school. And that's changing a little bit right now because it is a worker's job market right now. But it's typically that you get lowballed kind of right out of school, and then it kind of spikes all of a sudden at year 5, and then it blunts a little bit, and then spikes again between 8 and 12, and then it 8 to 12, and then it blunts again for 12 to 15, and then depending on where you choose, if you're getting into like say management, especially senior management, it'll come up again and then blunt again. So there's kind of these blunts and waves that occurs in terms of scale. It's a little bit linear depending on if you're staying there or not. But again, there's like different forces at play where you may not actually be able to make that jump if you're staying in that same exact role over time. And that's assuming that the new grad did a lateral transfer and said, hey, look, I want to be PT somewhere else, and then they're going to get that pay bump, right? And so that's the differences between the law of averages versus what we're talking about today, which is strategically mapping out your steps so you can take advantage of those. Spoken in another way, what we're really trying to do with our careers, at least on the monetary side in this talk right now, is we're trying to buy low, sell high against the job market, right? So we're trying to find opportunities where, hey, if it's a worker's market right now, this is the time for me to find opportunities, promotions, raises, negotiate, that kind of stuff. Versus where in periods of like hypersaturation, maybe it is, I'm making this up, like May or June, you have a whole bunch of new grads. Turnover is usually pretty low there. Everybody's hiring, right? That's not a good time to do a lateral transfer or ask for promotion. However, there's a lot of turnover that typically happens in October, November. And so that's a great time to try to snipe a good position. Oh, that's a fantastic question there. All right. So now that we kind of got the base out of the way, let's talk about how we can actually map this out. And we're gonna, I'll just warn you now, this is a really good time to grab questions and start thinking about things, because we're gonna move like very quickly to close the talk. I really like to have a lot of Q&A in terms of this, because this is how you get value out of a lunch and learn like this. So that was just a numerical lay of the land. We talked a little bit about career life cycles, right? Like how usually you have a 9 to 15 month burnout for new grads, 2 to 3 years usually for line staff, 1 to 2 years for line management, right? And then it blocks forward and backwards depending on where you are, location, type of organization that you're working with or for. So this is where we need to balance things that are sometimes diametrically opposed, right? It's one of those lessons in life where two things can be true at the same time, even if they're opposites. And in terms of mapping out your dream career, now that we have the lay of the land, what we really need to do is bake in some agility or flexibility along with a precise plan. And the best way to describe this is you need to have escape valves or off ramps or emergency hatches. When things don't work out, you still have an avenue. That's really what we're talking about. For myself, I didn't have that, but I was mentored into it, by my then hospital CEO, who's now retired, by saying, hey, look, if you want to get further in healthcare, you need to get your master's in business. And that's true at the time. Now it's a little different, but it was true at the time back then. Here are just a couple of things to think about, right? What's very, very popular right now is people want to get into education or into health tech. Sometimes people want to start getting promoted into clinic directors or corporate management, or they want to become an entrepreneur, or you want to move into fitness or strength and conditioning, or you want to go into like pure tech. Some people are going to medical sales. There's a lot of things out there in terms of non-traditional paths or atypical paths. And when it comes to how do you create these off-ramps or escape valves, what you need to do first is self-exposure. I think often what ends up happening in our career path is that, we're so focused on our day-to-day, and then we start dreaming about something else that we haven't validated that that's the right choice for us. A great example was when COVID came around, there was a bunch of new grads in the therapy field that all became digital marketing experts overnight. And a lot of them did very well, and most of them burnt out because they had no idea how like 24/7 and grueling it was to run a small like social media marketing agency, right? And a lot of those brands are gone now because that time is also passed, right? So you have to ride the waves of the market. This is one of those things, and we'll talk specifically about how we can map those things back. But I wanted to show you this before I flip back to this page, and I do see another question come through, and I'll get back to that in a moment. Is how do you actually map it? So here's an example. All right, so this is, call it a more typical career map. Is, say you have a new grad that goes, okay, I really want to become an industry leader in this field. I want to help shape policy. I want to help shape culture. I want to help shape the future and advocate for our profession and for our patients. So here's a possibility of what that looks like. All right, is that you get a strong foundation in the first couple of years, you find a mentor, and you might even start, instead of going down like a hyperclinical route, you might go down something like a business administration or healthcare administration certificate or credentialing route, right? And then you start to specialize in that area. And then this is where you can start to do branch off. So maybe you're going, I want to get into this leadership position, but there's a chance that this may not be for me. So maybe I also get a clinical credential like an OCS or CHT. This is also the time that you can start creating a true curriculum vitae for yourself, whether you're contributing by writing, you're jumping on podcasts, you're starting to teach local courses to the general population, you're creating a new program. Like something I did was I created a kettlebell exercise program. It was labeled a wellness program at the Metropolitan Medical Campus. That's where it got picked up by the local newspaper. And I've been known for that actually ever since, ironically enough. And they interviewed me on the local news channel. It was a ridiculous experience. It was a lot of fun, but you got to see a lot of like the pomp and circumstance behind local news stations. And it's all true, right? The weather people, like, again, I'm in Southern California, the weather people, there's wind and they're like, oh no, it's blowing me away, like that kind of stuff. It's all there. And so you get to experience that, and that becomes part of you, right? And as you move through, that's when you can start creating these little branches of, okay, I can still do something like a community exercise or wellness program. I can still do hand therapy if I don't end up liking management or start burning out on it. And the vice versa is true, right? Is maybe you're all clinical, you're all orthopedic, you're getting your OCS, you might be in residency, you might be thinking about fellowship. That's great. But you might want to branch off into other things. And perhaps you go, you know what, I might get burnt out in like front end clinical care. Maybe I need to learn about telehealth. Right. So it's creating these other avenues for yourself where you're going, okay, I want to focus here, but I have this little escape valve or a little emergency hatch of, if it doesn't work out, I can still fall back on this. And you'd be surprised how that plays out just naturally in life. It certainly did for me, where it's funny, like for myself, just to be kind of transparent and personal here, is, I was in private practice for 10 years. I'm still loosely connected to it. But there was a time where eventually I had enough of it, right? And so I ended up falling back on what I did in the early parts of my career, which was teaching, right? At the time, it was teaching community classes and in-services and a couple of continuing education courses. And then now I'm fully part of it as an adjunct professor for a couple of entities. And so it's funny how that early kind of seed became my now, new dream. Let's see, there's a couple more questions coming through that I do want to get to, but I think what will probably work the best is just to finish this kind of section, and then I'll jump right back into that. So please bear with me. So what I really want you to do is actually, after saying all this, and I will get to the Q&A portion, is, if you're hanging on to all this, right, you're thinking about the numbers and where you are, how many ever years of experience you have, or if you're satisfied or not in the field or in the setting or what have you, you're thinking about a change, or maybe you're just like very, very happy and you want to be able to preserve this. What I tell everyone in terms of career mapping is to pull it all the way back. And this is where it gets really personal and philosophical. And I think it's really important to do so. Often professional burnout is not one-dimensional, right? Not actually the workplace. It's not just the EMR that's slowing you down. It's not just the high volume. It's not just this or that. Often it's multidimensional, but that's the trigger, right? That's like the catalyst that melts everything down. For me, the first time I was burnt out, it was when I hit the glass ceiling in the acute care hospital. And there were other things going on, right? Like my wife was pregnant, and so we're nesting, we're expecting a baby, there's life complications. And then what broke it for me was when my management didn't recognize me and certain ideas that I felt were worthy of recognition. And then they kind of turned around and did different things with it when I left the hospital. And so that was what was hurtful to me. And that actually added on with life stress was what caused the meltdown. The second time I was burnt out was actually very similar in a way where, I was a rehab director and I was a little underpaid and I knew that. But I found a way to make the cost center very efficient and profitable, but they wanted more of that. And I basically said no. So, but a lot of that actually surrounded my personal life choices. I said no because I wanted to spend more time with my newborn kid. So, all to say, what I really want you to do, thinking about this, like whether you're looking at this slide going, okay, I want one of these things in my life. Like I want, say, health tech or health informatics, or I want to be a professor, or I want to, work from home and do telehealth, or I want to get into management, or I want to get into sales, or maybe I want to change out of the therapy field entirely. That's okay, right? That sometimes talks like this will spark that conversation. That's not wrong, right? It's realizing what the truth is in your life right now. Is I want you to define your North Star, or your true North Star. And what that means is I want you to write down 1 to 2 dream goals that you want in the long term. I said 10 years from now, maybe it's 5, maybe it's 3, depending on where you are in your lifespan. Maybe you're getting close to retirement or you're thinking about it. Whatever that long-term mark is, I just put 10 there for 10. I think it's a safe space to like kind of wiggle with. And what I want you to write there is not necessarily specific to your profession, right? Because a career is a mixture of what you are as a professional in an industry, but also who you are as a person in life. That is probably the most important takeaway from this entire talk, is that, say in 10 years, I'll just make this up. Say you're a new grad watching this, or maybe you're like 1, 2, 3, 5 years out. What I want you to think about is in 10 years, what type of person do you want to be, and what do you want to be surrounded by, right? Are you looking to perhaps get into a relationship and get married? Buy a house? Is there a specific car or life experiences or a place you want to live? Do you want to be healthier? Do you want to be less stressed? You want to patch up relationships with things that have fallen away? Do you want to open up a private practice or become maybe a regional vice president for a corporation in therapy, right? Whatever that dream goal is, it doesn't have to just be specifically career based. I need you to think about it from a life standpoint, because often it's when you don't add those pieces to career mapping where the career map fails. It's also when those escape valves that you need are not baked in, right? Because what if life changes? I unfortunately suffered a family loss on Thanksgiving Day. That changed everything for me. And I couldn't be more thankful for my current mixture of employment because it offered that flexibility. If I was still in private practice, there's no way I could have grappled with any of that. It was truly traumatizing. But that's an example of how you can kind of bake in some of these escape valves, these pressure release valves, these emergency levers to be able to help you as a person. So write down 1 or 2 dream goals for 5, 10 years from now, however long that needs to be. And then sometime, weekends around the corner, right? Spend about 30 minutes or so researching 1 or 2 of the salary trends, because that's kind of where we have to live, right? We have to pay our bills. Salary trends of what is required to get there. And then also the career step changes that needs to get there. As an example, say you're going, okay, I want to move closer to home. I want to buy a house. I want to start a family, right? That requires a certain level of economic savvy and volume and leverage to be able to get there. And so that becomes very quickly not a discussion about, I want my OCS or MDT or I want my CHC. Like that almost doesn't matter. You need to start thinking about, okay, what do I need to geographically do to get me closer to where I consider home, and settle down, start a family, that kind of stuff, right? Opposite may be true. You know what? I want to live a much more exciting, adventurous life. And then I want to, go somewhere and, hang my hat. So that might mean you need to start talking to travel agents and start thinking about where you want to be locationally for 13, 16, 24 weeks at a time, right? And then you have to have a financial plan around that for when you finally do want to settle down. So make sure you have that, again, that far true north, and then actual steps along the way that is required to get there. Because it's not always getting promoted from a PT1 to a PT2 to PT3. Sometimes it's like, you know what? I just have to pick up everything and move somewhere, right? Sometimes that's what the case is. And then what I really want you to do after all of that is, once you have those stepping stones put together, right? Remember to draw some release valves of what that might look like. Is take one very tangible step for the next 12 months that you can come back, right? So you can come back for around December, Christmas time of 2026, and go, I made that goal. And I want you to physically write it down. There's a lot of research behind that in neuropsychology. It's really, really cool. I think there's like a statistic that you're something like 85% more likely to attain a goal if you physically write it down. So I want you to physically write it down. I'd encourage you to actually physically write all this stuff down, but then take like a 3x5 card or a sticky note, write on the back of a playing card, right, in a Sharpie, and say, this is my 12-month goal. When I come back to December 11th of 2026, I want to be able to say, I got that done, right? So what is that first step? Whew. So let me, with me saying that, we are kind of into that point of, Q&A and general discussion. So let me take a look at what we have here in the Q&A bank. There's a couple questions here about asking about the salary report numbers, if they're purely salary. And in the 90s, benefits mattered. So let me just kind of read this together for everyone in case you're okay. So I think the spirit of the question, and please submit another question if I'm interpreting this incorrectly, is what is the nature of the reporting in some of these numbers? Does it include benefits? Does it include other associated benefits like 401k matching, or defined benefits like a pension plan, or PTO banking, sick time bank, which is usually considered separate? Was that included? What I can tell you is that often it was a merge of data for stuff like BLS, Indeed, LinkedIn, that kind of stuff. For my personal reporting, I've asked for salary only. So if you take a look at the Job Market Pulse, that was salary only. I did normalize it for per annum equivalent. That is a point of not, I guess, sampling bias. I wouldn't call it an error, but it's sampling bias, and we disclose that very openly, which is often per annum normalcy. So it's like if you have like somebody working only 3 out of 5 days, you have to match that up to something that's annual. But typically that rate is going to be a little bit different. Typically it's a little lower than somebody who's full-time if they're receiving benefits. And so we mark that in there. And also we have no way of telling if they're taking benefits. So sometimes if it's a per diem standpoint, then that rate's actually a little bit higher. And that's actually a really good point. This attendee, again, I thank you for giving that question out, is that sometimes it's not just the numbers that matter, right? Like my personal example of having a family loss, I was able to take bereavement benefits, right? So that's something to consider depending on who, what loved ones are in your life and what life stages they're at. Is there a bereavement benefit? Do I need to look that up? Right? Sometimes that stuff is so much more valuable than just having some of the numbers, per hour, in the bank and that kind of stuff. I will say that often what is not fully explained upon interview for jobs, and certainly is a little underexplained in school, is the value of benefits and the value of PTO. In most states, PTO is actually the paid time off dollars are actually owed to you. They can't be taken from you. That's a whole labor law dispute. I'm not an attorney, but I've seen it happen. That's why a lot of larger employers also have sick bank hours. Sometimes they call it like ESO or ESI or ESL, I think, even like extended sick leave benefits. And those are additional benefits on top of you that are not covered by labor laws. And usually they don't kick in until you're a day or two sick. So you have to burn 1 or 2 days of PTO before you start using your sick leave hours. And that's like a whole nother like salary talk. But yeah, it's a great question is, where are these numbers? And that also leads to a little bit of the skewing, right? So if we go back to this slide here of upward and let's see, upward and downward skews, apologize. You can see why sometimes the averages are deceptive, right? If the mode is where most of us are, on the right skewed area, right, we're taking a look at averages and they're just that far away from us, going like, who's getting paid 98 to $106,000 a year as a line PT, right? And often the same case is on the other side where uh, I should just be happy to be paid a certain amount if I'm in line management or in middle management, because most of us are a little bit higher. And if I see the average down there, I'm going, oh, that's weird. Like I should just be thankful. And that's just the nature that's actually the nature for most industries in terms of line versus managerial pay scales. So we are 47 minutes in. I didn't actually expect to talk this long. So let me pull up this final slide up here. And, this is where I like to just open things up. I'll review the chat in a moment. But really to sum things up, right? Like this talk today, mapping out your dream therapy career, is better retitled, honestly, as mapping out the dream for your life with your career as the engine that fuels it. All right. So like maybe you want to travel the world. You need to find an engine that fuels that. Maybe you want to settle down. You need to find the engine that fuels that. Maybe you just want to make a ton of money. Nothing wrong with that. You have to find the engine that fuels that. But you have to see that from a faraway lens as your whole life as a whole. Because often what you'll see is, somebody who's, say, in that bucket of, hey, I'm a new grad, I'm single, unattached, I just need to make money. Great. So you're a travel therapist now. That's probably what's going to happen. You're going to travel for 4, 5, 6 years and suddenly realize that, oh no, I needed another plan because now I'm ready to settle down. And that's why that 10-year goal is so important. So you can have that and track like, okay, I'm 3 to 4 years now in travel therapy. I've been making really good money. I've been paying off my loans. I found a significant other. We were starting to make plans. How do you settle that down? And actually clearly remember a new grad I was mentoring on that. It was a husband-wife couple. Both of them were travel PTs for a while. They traveled for together for a number of years, and they said, "Look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to make a ton of money, and basically like pretend like we're living in hostels, pay off all of our loans, and then start a private practice." And that's what they did, and they settled down after. So let me go ahead and check the chat. Please do toss in any kind of Q&A that you might have, whether it's about the salary stuff or otherwise, and I'll answer them in the order I receive it. I understand they're being moderated, so let me check the chat here. Apologize, I'm trying to scroll here in a meaningful way. All right. So first off, hello everybody. There's a whole bunch of you from New Jersey. Shout out. And some Georgia, Florida. I see somebody from California. And I think we might actually know each other. Say hello to me privately if we do know each other. I have a feeling we do. Let's see. Just want to make sure that we got it all there. Awesome. Okay. Let me take a look. We have some awesome questions coming through. All right. I'm going to tackle the first one here. And I'm going to try to, I'm going to close the group chat just so I can actually focus here on the Q&A piece. Here's another question. Are bonuses, incentive bonuses growing in our field? Is this something we can look forward to in the future? If so, does that vary greatly between staff and directors and managers? And the answer is yes, yes, and yes. So getting paid for what you do, not just on an hourly basis, is definitely becoming increasing in our field. And it's a way for employers to mitigate margins of economic error. So if you imagine like a base pay that covers kind of what would be required for like base living, so to speak, in your region. But it also helps keep the lights on if your schedule is slow. That's definitely becoming something. And then paying you progressively more and more and more and more, depending on what type of billing volume that you put through. Because we have to be honest with ourselves, right? It's really, really noble and altruistic in a certain sense to think of our professionality and services as something that's, a calling, which I think it is for pretty much 99% of us. But is also, there's a business model behind it, or this economic model behind it is probably a more accurate term. And that means that we have to live within a certain level of like financial realities. I have an MBA. I don't even like that reality, but that's what we see it. So how does that work? Usually staff is individual based. So it's like if you have a certain level of efficiency or productivity or number of visits or, completion of plan of care, certain satisfaction rate, it's usually like a multivariable thing. And different organizations will do it differently. Usually the simpler the model, the kind of the more satisfactory it is to both management and line staff, because it's not so complicated where you're like, okay, I can't even track if they're giving me the right bonus yet. For directors, managers, and uppers, typically those are going to be PNL or KPI type profiles. KPI is a key performance indicator, so that's going to be like, are you profiting? What's your productivity across the average of the entire clinic? How many new evals have you done? Like that kind of stuff. And so it's more like macro lens stuff where you're looking top down, going, how's the operation as a whole going? And then you get bonus out for that. Usually also at different tiers. Like if they reach certain tiers, and then you get paid a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. So that's typically how that works, and it does vary from organization to organization. I've actually helped consult and craft some of these things in private practice, and typically the response is really good because now it's on paper, and the clinician goes, "Great, I don't know, I'll pay for Christmas presents, so we're gonna all the deductibles are filled out. We're gonna see as many people as I can right now, and it's gonna be a great quarter for us, right? And it becomes a great quarter for the clinic." All right. Another question. Do we see AI replacing our PT jobs in the future? No. I see AI working. It's the same deal. So actually, full disclosure, I do work, in telehealth with AI empowered technology. I also am an adjunct professor for a cybersecurity, business administration, and AI technologies university as well. So I'm in the AI field. So you're going to say, I'm a former engineer, right? I know how to code. I work in AI in several areas. I'm not threatened by it, but that's because I'm working in there and I can see it. I don't think it's going to replace our jobs. I think that AI is very, very far away from being smart enough, like truly smart enough to do our jobs for us. It is only as smart as our programmers can program it to be. And it has a certain level of machine learning, but that's, again, kind of a misnomer. And I highly recommend it. If you haven't tried AI yet, go online, look up any kind of free AI. Excuse me, I'm going to pop in another cough drop. It could be Gemini. It could be ChatGPT. It could be the Microsoft one. It doesn't really matter. But try playing with it and do anything with it at all and ask it to do stuff for you. And you'll realize that it's really not as smart as people are making it out to be. AI is best seen as a next generation search engine where it does that good of a search that it can put its own searches together into an end product, like what I showed on screen, right? That was supposedly my career path. So I don't see it replacing our jobs, but I do see that more PT jobs are very likely going to be influenced by AI, that we're going to have to learn how to use it, whether it's in our EMRs or we're just going to get like AI style tech jobs, which are becoming more and more frequent. Hope that answered the question. Another question. I'm very interested in starting my own cash-based practice for a niche market. I'm concerned about profitability. Do you have insight on the model? I do have insight on the model. I've consulted for how to start this up. I used to be part of one. And so the profitability, so let me put it first here. Most cash models are going to be micro practices where you work out of, say, a CrossFit box or where you rent a space in another clinic. And the scalability is really a bigger problem than profitability, because typically what you're basically marketing is a higher level service against very savvy healthcare consumers that they understand, look, if my deductible is like $3,000 or whatever it is, I might as well pay you $200, $300, $400 a pop directly and maybe do 5 or 6 sessions and just get it done, right? It's less than the total deductible. I'll have a better experience. I'll have a better result. Usually these individuals are a little bit more affluent, and then they can submit that and claim it against their PPO or what have you if it's part of their out-of-network benefits. The profitability is typically there, but I will say it is a lifestyle business. You are tied to that practice. So most people have decided to use this as more of like a 2 or maybe 3 office days open versus a full-time job. Those that can get a full-time job, that's usually locationally specific. And so again, you typically see it more in metropolitan areas or suburban areas that are highly residential, a little bit more affluent. And the niche, you have to do a good amount of research to make sure that that niche exists in your area. So whether it's like, say, pelvic and women's health, right, you have to make sure that that exists there. You need a good crop of of patients that are in several buckets that would be ideal for that. Another question here, kind of similar. Any feedback on Med B patient care as a at home as a personal business? Be very precise about your compliance. I can't stress that enough. There's a lot of resources out there that are incomplete. So I'm not saying that they're wrong, they're incomplete. The problem really isn't doing it and getting it done properly. It's making sure you have all your I's dotted and T's crossed. I recommend that before anybody starts your own business, especially if you're going to dip into insurance or into Medicare populations, is to look up the last couple of big headlines of PT practice owners or executives that got, that either got one of these or got one of these. Take me away. Make sure you research that, because those are easy to make mistakes. A lot of times those mistakes are not made very consciously. It's like not intentionally. You're trying to rip off Medicare or anything like that nature. It's just you didn't know what the procedures were, but we're still liable at that. Sometimes at a criminal level. So is it a good business? It can be. Just make sure that you have all the I's dotted, T's crossed. Again, it's all population based. You have to make sure you're in a Medicare friendly area. There's plenty of folks that fit that population. They're interested in that. You have the own infrastructure for it and a way to also spread the word, whether it's digital marketing, word of mouth, or what have you. There's a lot of discussion there, but you can certainly do it. It's been done. But again, it's a question of, is it a lifestyle business? Like, is this just something you want to do and make money with it? Or is it something you want to build into a company where you start hiring other people under you? Another question, is it profitable to have a PT YouTube channel? Yes, it is. It is a grind. So as you can tell, I have a little filming background. You can't see it over there, but I have a filming light over there. Actually, I have another film light over here. And I have where did I go? I have a professional camera over here. So I used to be in the PT media and marketing space in force. I'm still there. I still have a presence. Can you make money through that? Absolutely. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of planning. And you have to be able to do it in a way where you're going to have to be willing to take criticism from your compatriots, because the content, and this is one of those interesting marketing lessons, is content to consumers is different than content to your colleagues. And we're kind of bad at that in therapy. Like, we try to impress our colleagues first before we impress our consumers. And that actually has led to a lot of professional stagnant growth on the macro industry level, where we're so busy trying to be, clinically correct, following the evidence and all that stuff, when most of the time people that have the money and want to spend the money, they just want to feel better. And we forget to define life in those terms. So if you want to start a YouTube channel or podcast or social media presence, it can absolutely be profitable. And you can even sidebar that into telehealth services or into mobile therapy, or even open a clinic based off of it. It's happened. But you have to be very, very precise on the content you create and make sure that's meaningful to the end consumer. All right. Any other questions? I know looks like we're starting to dip into the hour plus. But I do, I'm going to be here for just a little bit longer. I'm big on that just as an instructor, is I want to make sure we answer as many or all questions as possible. If your questions are answered, thank you for coming. If you have more questions, drop them in. I'll try to stay another 5 or so minutes, depending on how many more questions come through. The last slide on this deck is just the resources that I used for today's talk. But again, I just want to thank you all for coming. Thank you for, I put this funny little thing. Thank you for investing in your future. Really, it's thank you for prioritizing yourself. Like, truly, we don't do a good job as healthcare providers in self-prioritization. So today's, a good time to make that turnaround. Look for your true North Star, whether it's 3, 5, 10 years out. Make sure you have concrete steps along the way with escape valves or escape routes, levers. And then write down on a sticky or 3x5 card, like laminate it, put it on the I don't know, like tape it on the door handle, microwave, I don't care. But put it there and check back next year and you feel so inclined, reach out to me and tell me that you made it. But otherwise, thank you for coming, and you'll feel free to take off. Don't forget to download the slide deck if you want it. And let me answer another question here. How does a PTA go about getting a job in telehealth? First thing is you have to start looking. And this is, let me put this out here. Any kind of atypical, non-clinical, or non-traditional, career route in our field is a numbers game. So as an example, I had to apply to probably 50 or 60 different instructorship or professorship job things all over the place. It was on the native sites, it was on Indeed, it was on LinkedIn, before I even got an email back. And usually you don't hear anything, and then like way later you get this like generic we'll keep your stuff on file. So as a PTA, as a CODA, as a therapist assistant, getting a job in telehealth, apply everywhere. Don't take rejection personally, and see if you can connect with recruiters or managers or leads online, especially on LinkedIn. I think it was like back in 2017 or 18, they predicted LinkedIn was going to be like the next big social media platform. Turns out it's actually this year. This year, finally, like 7-8 years later. Sorry, I'm a middle schooler, not 6-7 years later. 7 or 8 years later, it finally came to fruition where LinkedIn is actually a very good way to reach out to people. So my recommendation is, you want to get into telehealth, is to start searching for telehealth companies and start applying to every position. It may even say that you need, say, a DPT. That's okay, apply. They may have a non-DPT role for you that isn't posted on their website or on LinkedIn or on Indeed. Often there are internal kind of job searches that occur in organizations that are not publicly posted, depending on the rules and regulations of that particular organization. So I recommend that you search out all the telehealth companies that are out there that you feel that you even remotely align with, and then apply to all of them. Directly contact the recruiters or the HR folks or the clinical leads on LinkedIn, and see what you might be able to do to get in there. And also start learning about what that actually looks like. What telehealth truly is now in 2025, because telehealth in, say, the early 2000s was a very different experience than it is today. Thank you for making me part of your day. Hopefully that this has inspired you to take some action, to kind of solidify some of those ideas that have been floating up. Often, right, if you're joining a talk like this, it's because you want to either make a change or get ready to make a change. So hopefully today's been a good catalyst to making that change into fruition. Again, I welcome you to reach out. I'm not hard to find online. Let me know how it goes, whether it's December of 2026, or let me know how it goes, in a couple of days. Maybe you've taken action already. So thank you for coming again, and to Summit Education for hosting this talk today of mapping out your dream therapy career and making it happen. I'm Ben Fung, and thank you.